Global politics rules.
Right. Either you can talk through it or I can talk. You're going to get more out of me describing things. Anti-terrorism. First, this term terrorism. How is it different to war? The point is that terrorism is against civilians. It intentionally targets civilians, and that's what distinguishes it between that and war. So when one state attacks another state, that's conflict or war. When you target civilians, that's terrorism. And you can have state-based terrorism, so when a state targets civilians, and you can have non-state, like the Boston bombings several weeks ago, like the attempted bombings this morning in Jakarta.
They're always political. Like if they label it on the news terrorist attack, you can automatically say that they were doing it.
Yeah, well, you've got to be skeptical of everything on the media to begin with, but terrorism is political.
Okay.
It has an objective, and the objective isn't to kill those civilians. There's a different objective. So that's the action, but it has a different objective. JI's objective wasn't to blow up the Bali bombings, it's to have a pan-Islamic state across all of Southeast Asia. That's their true objective, that's political. So Indonesia has a threat of terrorism, and they need a strategy. Let's get through this. What's the context? 3 particular bombings. We've done this before when we looked at Jemaah Islamiyah. The context is bombs going off across Indonesia. The group letting these bombs off is JI. Victims, in particular, they're Western targets. Bali, and these were nightclubs which were frequented by mostly young Australians and young Westerners. Marriott Hotel, the Marriott is an American hotel chain. The Australian Embassy, they're all Western targets, and they're being attacked in Indonesia. So that's the context. So why does Indonesia need an anti-terrorism policy or strategy? I may have chosen the creepiest picture I could find. Alright. The first reason is that there's a threat to Indonesia's national interest. There's a threat to their security. To quote one of these Jemaah Islamiyah speakers, our jihad will continue until the liberation of the land of Muslims. So they're threatening the sovereignty of Indonesia. They're not threatening our sovereignty. They don't want Australia to be a part of their pan-Islamic state. They're threatening Indonesia's sovereignty. Indonesia's ability to exercise power and authority is being questioned. It's being challenged with bombs. And he was the leader of that group. They need an anti-terrorism strategy to maintain security. If they didn't set up Detachment 88, and I'm jumping ahead, they would lose more and more security. Detachment 88, the terrorists would get more and more followers, they'd be more and more successful with their bombs. So there's a need to maintain national security. And we have the same need. And there's a real debate over what's the best way for us to achieve this. Because we're spending we're giving Indonesia tens of millions of dollars. We're training their anti-military group. Now some people say, why don't we spend the money here? Well, the jihadists are over there. We can't put our military in Indonesia. That would violate their sovereignty. So let's help the group who are trying to get rid of the terrorists. There's this side reason, and that's the more stable Indonesia is, the more stable any state is, the more likely it is to be a destination for tourists and for foreign direct investment. I've made this comparison in the past. The reason Africa suffers, one of the reasons, is because it can't attract much FDI and doesn't attract many tourists either. It should. It's an incredible continent and it's incredibly diverse. But the fear, due to instability, leads many people to stay away. So in order to make Indonesia a safe place for Westerners, for investment, Indonesia has to stomp on terrorism. Australian school groups aren't allowed to travel to Indonesia because it's got a certain status, like a travel with caution or something like that. So the Department of Education has said school groups can't go. It's an unsafe place to go. So right there, that's a barrier to the two countries getting to know each other.
You know how you talk about maintaining national security? You started talking about Australia.
Yes.
Why?
Well, we have the same need to maintain our national security.
So then if we said, how is it maintaining Indonesia's national security?
You know what I'm saying? By helping them, we help ourselves.
Yeah, but aren't we talking about Indonesia?
Yeah.
So why are we talking about Australia?
Because in any essay, that's something you can work in there. Now, if you can talk about how Detachment 88 benefits both Indonesia and us.
But how is Australia helping Indonesia helping their national security?
How does it help us or how does it help Indonesia? Well, we're really good at training military groups. This is something we're really good at, and we've got a huge amount of money. We spend a lot on our military, so we're willing to spend, because this is a feature of our national security. We don't have that many homegrown terrorists in Australia. They're not threatening us here, they're threatening our interests over there. So, the first response, you know this response.
Is this military?
Yes, this is absolutely military power. They set up a new group, Detachment 88, works with Indonesian police, other state agencies, US trained, Australian trained and funded. So we're implicated in what this group does. Our government has decided we want to help them have the best anti-terrorist group possible. We're going to help train them, we're going to help fund them. So in this case, Australia and Indonesia's national security is intertwined on this issue. If we can eradicate JI, we make ourselves more secure. So it's in our national interest as well. So this is a hard power response. It's a military response.
You've got 8 minutes.
So this is the response we know of. There has also been a couple of soft power responses, and this is going to be our best example for hard and soft power on either a SAC or the exam. Because Indonesia and Australia have worked together with soft power. Can remind me what soft power is? To be appealing, to offer something that's appealing.
The character. Like persuade.
To persuade, to be enticing, to co-opt instead of force. So one thing we've done together is to improve diplomatic relations. So there's a memorandum of understanding is like an agreement of understanding. So when two states come together and they agree on certain things that they're willing to do or help each other with. So arrangements. So this is soft power because Indonesia and Australia have recognised that if they work together on this particular issue, they're going to be more effective. So one thing is to sign memorandum of understandings. Similarly, the second one is very similar, a treaty. We've actually got a treaty that we've signed with Indonesia. And some of the things from that treaty, a framework for deepening and expanding bilateral cooperation.
Same.
You don't have to type this all down now.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But it's so much easier to do it right now.
It's all about cooperation. That's the key word here. In Unit 3, that's actually one of our terms, international cooperation. But cooperating on this particular issue helps both states, and this is soft power. We're not forcing Indonesia to do anything, we're cooperating with them in the hope that they will do things that we want them to do. And likewise, they benefit from that cooperation. They get our money and they get our training. So by working together, we can both achieve one aspect of our national interests, to combat terrorism in Southeast Asia. So some people are often really critical of the amount of money we spend on other nations, and the amount of money we give to other nations, because they ignore the fact that we get something out of it. In this case, we can give tens of millions of dollars to Indonesia. When was the last time a bomb went off in Australia? I can't think of that wasn't a terrorist attack though. That was a war. We haven't had one.
So one in the street like last night. Yeah, there was a house bomb. Yeah.
Terrorist attack or a gas canister going off?
I don't know. It could have been a meth lab or a terrorist.
Actually, meth labs do blow up all the time in Australia, but that's not a terrorist attack. They do. It's not that no one wants to target us. They do. But we're being proactive in combating terrorism. And the best way for us to be proactive in terms of soft power is prevention. This is a prevention method. Let's work together before we have a problem.
Wait, no.
Yes.
No.
The next power, this one's the best one for soft power. We give over $500 million to Indonesia to build schools. Now, if most Australians knew about this, they'd go berserk, because their instant reaction would be, why are we spending $500 million on the Indonesian education system? Why aren't we spending that here? I've got a friend who teaches in a school in the northern suburbs. They don't have heaters or aircon. Now, we have some hot summers here, and they've got big classes. They can't afford aircon or heaters. Why are we sending $500 million to Indonesia?
I think this is Indonesia stealing the money and like sneakily teaching them that we just give money.
No.
Like if we pretend they like
We gave them this money. We've built over 2,000 schools. Is that number up there? It is. Over 2,000 schools. Why would we build schools over there when we've got schools here falling down? Maybe not ours.
I think it's more humanitarian for us to give them the opportunity to have schooling when we're sitting here complaining about no aircon.
No, this isn't about humanitarian reasons. This is security. What are the security reasons?
Oh, so we have a better image?
Nope.
and we can teach them like specific things.
So we
So that we can educate Australian militia?
We're bad.
Future generations like us.
So they're not
Did anyone read the first sentence?
Combat Christianity.
No one just suddenly wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a terrorist. You get indoctrinated over time in radical Islamic schools. So, what we're doing, Pearl, Sarah, what we're doing is building more schools, Annie, that aren't radical, that are more like our values, and we're doing this with Indonesia. So young kids now, instead of only going to the radical Islamic school, now they can go to an Islamic school that isn't radical, that accepts other people, that doesn't show them how to make bombs, instead teaches them things like reading and writing.
Are they going to start bombing schools then?
Who?
No terrorists. They will.
If I was a terrorist, I'd be like,
That was anti.
This is soft power. This is the very definition of soft power. You know, instead, Australia could have taken a hard power approach. We could have bombed the radical schools. This is cooperatively done. The two states working together.
Yeah, but
Culture.
the money that
Making something else. Yes, but we benefits.
if a lot of countries have the money to spend
Oh, they don't, that's right, they
so there
can't.
have to be funds.
Yes, that's the whole point. Now, because of our economic power, we can achieve this. Other states can't, you're dead right.
Or them.
Alright, we're not going to go through this, but the point, and hopefully you can see how an essay, right here you can see an essay structure. If you've got an essay about hard and soft forms of power, you can see how you could start with what have been Indonesia's military response to stop terrorism? Attachment 88. Then you've got all these soft power responses. So for next lesson, let's quickly review. Shackled. You're not doing anything but focusing. Some of you still only 2.2. Watch the videos on essay writing. Write your first essay. Tuesday, I've had enough excuses. 4 days.
Hey guys, it's Fee here. Hope you've enjoyed the video. More from Miss Fee coming soon. Bye. Bye. Losers.
Alright, enough. Yes, it's in my classes now. This is part 2 of anti-terrorism. I began it several lessons ago. And I'm going to move through the first part really quickly because I've got videos today for each of Indonesia's responses. So, there's a threat to Indonesia. The background to the issue, terrorist attacks, 3 of them. These attacks particularly target Western interests.
Like you.
Yes. So, Indonesia needs a response so it can tackle JI, it can maintain security, it can be a safe place for investors. So what has it done? So all of that is the background. What has it done? It's had a hard power response. We know hard power is about force, it's about coercion, tends to involve the military. They've established this group, Attachment 88, we've spoken about them, counter-terrorist group. US and Australia funded and trained. That doesn't have to be said perfectly. You can mix and match which one trains them, which one funds them, it's fine, as long as you mention the 3 states. So the US and Australia are involved, and this isn't like a conspiracy. We say we're involved. Our politicians talk about it. We're proud of helping Indonesians with this. So that's a hard power response. Let's check how effective this has been. Oh, that was my funny meme. Let's leave that up there. Okay, should have started with that. All right, let's start with this one. Okay.
Indonesia's military conducted a joint exercise over the weekend to prepare for a possible terror attack in the region. Various situations were set up to develop the force's experience and foster leadership talents just in case of an attack.
Indonesia Special Forces conducted an anti-terror joint exercise on Sunday at 3 different locations in Banten Province on Java Island. It's part of an effort to improve counter-terrorism capabilities. The exercise mobilized about 200 participants from the Navy, Air Force, and Special Forces.
This exercise is also to evaluate and to make a real operation plan. And I hope we are ready for the real situation.
Authorities say the aim of the drill is to make sure the Special Forces are ready in case of a possible terror attack and to improve the speed of response.
This exercise is also to evaluate and to make...
It was not meant to be... Come on, mate.
A real operation plan, and I hope we are ready for the real situation.
Participants from the Special Forces took part in role-play situations where they had to free hostages from a tanker ship and a government building that had been hijacked. The joint exercise is also aimed at increasing leadership skills in the event of a real attack. Indonesian Special Forces have also held joint exercises with neighboring countries to gain international experience.
All right, there's one. Let's look at some specific examples to Detachment 88.
Indonesia's anti-terrorist squad has arrested 11 suspected Islamic militants. It said planned to attack the US Embassy, a plaza near Australia's embassy, and the offices of Freeport McMoran Copper and Golds. The Detachment 88 squad seized bomb-making equipment and one bomb ready to be used by a new militant group called Araka Sunni for the Indonesian Society, a national police spokesman reported in a statement. Reported targets include the US consulate in Surabaya, East Java, the embassy in Jakarta, and Plaza 89 in Jakarta, in front of the Australian embassy and offices of mining company Freeport. Hasmi also allegedly planned an attack on the mobile police brigade in the central Java city of Strondol. The arrests by the elite police squad in the island of Java were the latest step in a crackdown by authorities against militants, during which dozens have been arrested and at least 7 killed. They come 10 years this month after a bomb attack in Bali killed 202 people, most of whom were foreign tourists. Since Special Detachment 88 was formed in 2003, the Indonesian security forces have arrested more than 700 suspected militants and killed about 60.
So it's hard to doubt the effectiveness of this response. Thank you, YouTube. Alright, it's hard to doubt the effectiveness of this hard power response. Okay, they form this group, they're tracking down terrorists, they're shooting them, they're imprisoning them. And we're a part of it. But there's an ineffective part as well.
Of abusing its power in the troubled Indonesian province. The notorious squad, known as an Australian-funded counter-terrorism unit in West Papua is facing new accusations of abusing its power in the troubled Indonesian province. The notorious squad, known as Detachment 88, has launched a fresh crackdown on independence activists in the wake of an expose by this program in August. 8 men have been detained and accused of bomb-making. Separatist leaders claim the explosives were planted and they've been framed to justify the squad's activities. Hayden Cooper has this report.
Jayapura, West Papua is a city marred by violence and tension, where independence leaders have been arrested, beaten and killed, and where police have been confronted by unruly and angry demonstrations. When 730 travelled to the province in August, the crackdown on the independence movement was already severe, resulting in several deaths, including of this man, independence leader Marco Tabuni, shot in this street, witnesses say, by the Australian-trained and funded police unit, Detachment 88.
Untuk kami pastikan itu susah sekali.
Clearly, it was them who killed him because we saw them shoot him and take him to their hospital.
Since then, the crackdown has worsened. Victor Yamo succeeded Tabuni as leader of the West Papua National Committee, or KNPB. This week, he sent this video to 730.
We are the non-violent activists in West Papua. We will fight for our right of freedom according to the peaceful means in West Papua. We demand our right of self-determination through referendum to be held in West Papua by UN peacefully.
I'm going to stop there, but that's the point though. So there's an ineffective side. When they use this anti-terrorist group against independence leaders, independence groups, people they just don't like, it makes them look bad. It's bad. I mean, there are ethical issues, of course, but internationally, it's not good for Indonesia. And we're implicated in this as well. So, as effective and ineffective, it's got two sides. Returning to... The other good thing about this is, this whole Detachment 88 thing is an example of foreign policy. Because it involves multiple states across this region working together to combat terrorism in the region. Because Jemaah Islamiyah isn't just an Indonesian group. Remember, it's a Southeast Asian terrorist group. So this is our way to talk about Indonesia pursuing foreign policy in the region.
So we shot that Australia?
We didn't shoot
Well,
him.
Australia's.
We trained the guys who shot him.
I thought it was our troops.
No, it's an Indonesian group.
So we just train.
We help train them.
Okay, we don't actually deploy any of our troops.
No. Well, we can't. We're not allowed to unless we're invited. No. So that's one hard power response. Juxtaposed to that, juxtaposed is like in comparison, in contrast, alongside that but different. The English teacher in me wants to. Soft power. Diplomatic agreements. We've got two. The big one's the Lombok Treaty, and we're going to keep coming back to it because we get to use that again when we do people movement and when we do terrorism later in the year. But two diplomatic agreements. Soft power, states working together, co-opting each other, all the positive, cooperative language. The other one I really like, and which is a little bit more complex than this, is this soft power response. So, Australia has spent over $500 million building 2,000 new schools. And there are a couple of good videos out there that address this and talk about it. So let's watch. Hang on, I've got to... These links are in my classes as well. There's...
Nama saya Agit Nubahita Salsabila. Saya biasa dipanggil dengan teman-teman saya Agit. Sekarang saya duduk di bangku kelas 8B. Saya bersekolah di MTS Negeri 1 Atap Balaraja. Saya senang sekolah di sini karena mempunyai teman yang baik dan guru-guru yang ramah.
Bantuan yang dibantu dari Australia itu sangat membantu sekali untuk masyarakat kita sendiri. Mereka mengajarkan senang, dekat, kemudian fasilitas sekolah juga memadai dibandingkan sekolah-sekolah yang jauh belum tentu memadai.
So education is the key to development. It's good for individuals, it's good for their families, and it's also good for whole communities. And that's why it's our highest priority here in Indonesia. Our new education program, which is done in partnership with the Indonesian government, builds on the success of our previous education support. We will be building thousands of schools. We will be improving the quality of thousands of Islamic schools, which is important because that's where many of the poorest children, and especially girls, go to school. And we will be helping schools use their scarce resources better.
Menggapai cita-cita saya ingin menjadi agar bisa menuangkan sedikit ilmu kepada orang.
Okay. You skeptic.
Saya berterima kasih kepada Australia bahwa telah menyumbangkan istilahnya dana, walaupun ya istilahnya nggak berupa misalnya seperti uang, tapi istilahnya masa depan dari saya di sekolahan ini.
It's a little bit propagandary. And we could talk about the whole ethics or human rights of it, but in the context of Indonesia's response, this is a soft power response. Indonesia working with Australia. So your language has to be about Indonesia and Australia working together to build these schools. Remember, this whole unit is about Indonesia's response. It's what Indonesia does. So in this case, Indonesia working with Australia, allowing Australia to build these schools and working with it. And it's a great soft power response because the underlying thing is that it helps combat radical Islam. If the government runs the schools and we help run the schools, then we know what's happening in those schools. We know the curriculum won't be radical. They won't have versions of Islam that are violent or extremist. So spending this money helps us, our security. We might want to spend it here, but we can get greater effects spending it over there. This is what the US has been doing for a couple of decades now. Instead of fighting wars on its own territory, you fight the wars elsewhere. Or you spend the money elsewhere before the threat gets here. It's not an accident that no one has let off a terrorist bomb in Australia. It's because we're proactive. We're going to try and stop terrorism at the cause. So this is different to Detachment 88. Detachment 88 tries to stop the terrorists once they've become terrorists. This gets to the cause of terrorism. Let's stop them before they even become a terrorist. When they're children, before they get indoctrinated.
But it stops terrorists after what?
Even before they can become a terrorist. So
No, but the other one.
well, the other one is what is it called? Not cause and effect. I think about what not repercussions. There's a way of framing it. One's like addressing the cause, and one's addressing. Not the effect either.
No, but like what's the first one? So it stops terrorists after.
That's it. Prevention or. They talk about this with medicine. You can do prevention or you can do treatment. Not sure we can talk about terrorism as treatment. So that's
Rehabilitation.
it's not that either. So that's a soft power response.
Wrong. Out.
We're not going to fill in the table. Effectiveness. I've been speaking about this. There are stats here. This is on my classes. Over 700 arrested, 500 prosecuted. JI has shrunk dramatically. Their leaders in prison. However, there are some limitations to its effectiveness. There are concerns with what Detachment 88 does. Long history of human rights abuses. So they're using this particular group for their own interests. And we're complicit. And that link is there for you to watch in your own time. It's our Foreign Minister, Minister Bob Carr, talking about how he's worried about how Detachment 88 is being used. He's worried about the training we're giving them being used for the wrong purposes.
We don't have the limitation now.
Oh, okay.
This is updated. I've made changes. So.
Thank you for many
No. No. That's the limitation.
Yeah, I've updated this since you've downloaded it. So get a new copy. Delete the one on your hard drive and.
Yeah, I just got it.
Oh, that means I've got to update the one on my classes. Let me do that in a moment when you start the work. Effectiveness of the soft response. It's hard to say. This is a long-term solution. So the problem with soft power is that it's often long-term. So we don't know how effective it'll be, but we do know that 2,000 schools have been built. That's great. That's a good thing. 2 states working together, building schools, targeting cultural change. So you could probably drag some cultural power out of this as well, if you needed to. Indonesia trying to combat radical Islam, appear better in the international community, etc.
Is it like Indonesia's power because they're allowing us to do it?
That's how we've got to describe it. We've got to make sure we say that it's Indonesia's power because they're working with Australia, or they're allowing Australia, or they're.
And so that's power, but not foreign policy.
No, that's part of foreign. It's.
But is it a power?
It's both.
But then why is it Rio Tinto and the troops? Like I just don't understand the difference between the two. Like Indonesia's working with
No.
CNC.
The difference would be that the West Papuan issue is only in Indonesia. The terrorist issue is a regional terrorist issue. So the terrorist issue goes across borders. So JI actually works in Malaysia, Philippines, Myanmar. So that's the big difference. So when they're fighting terrorism, they're fighting it across the region. So that's what makes it foreign outside of the state.
No, but I don't mean foreign policy. I mean with power, because you said like you have Rio Tinto uses Indonesian troops. You said that wasn't military power.
Well, yeah,
it was a foreign.
But that one we can't really use because it's not the state using power. I mean, it'd be you'd have to spend a few explaining sentences to get there.
Allowing it to use power and so is then including Australia. They're allowing the power. Like that's what I'm just trying to.
I see your point.
Between the two.
And what you're getting at is exactly the difficulty with this course. You can argue almost anything in an answer.
Yeah.
It's how well you can lay it out. Because there are no correct answers. It's how well you can convince whoever's reading your answer that this is a form of whatever hard power or cultural power or FPI.
So it's not quite like a straight like.
No, and I try and give you the most obvious examples I can.
Yeah.
but there's still an onus on the person writing the answer to make the links back to whatever it is, cultural power or, you know, foreign policy or globalisation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
As a foreign policy instrument, we've got a couple of examples of foreign policy. One is militarisation. So, forming Detachment 88 is an example of a new military group. And we also have examples of diplomacy here. So, two types of foreign policy instruments are being employed. I think that should be it. There are lots of additional resources which you can get that in your own time. Worksheet 2.3. What do they say?
Are we not filling out the PowerPoint?